An aspirational view for TCO. Thank you for participating today. I see this effort as transformational. And as with any transformation, I recognize that it will take some time to accomplish. My name is Deke Smith. I'm a facilities as well as an IT architect. I'm an AIA Fellow Emeritus and a Fellow in the Building Smart International. I worked for the Department of Defense for 30 years. While doing that, volunteered at the National Institute of Building Sciences for 22 years before becoming part of the NIB staff for 8 years after I retired from DoD. I have managed assets from our Homeowners Association of 537 homes to military installations to the entire DoD inventory of 570,000 assets. I continue to be involved with BIM education, Building Smart US, Building Smart International, and implementing total cost of ownership after co-developing two-part TCO standard through APA. This is the focus of the presentation. I will address why I see this as critical to a more holistic success in our industry. First costs are the costs associated with planning, design, and construction. These are the estimates we historically see when preparing to build a new facility. Rarely do we even compare first cost to what the actual cost was for this phase. Truth is that first cost represents a very small portion of what an owner spends on a facility over its life. Total cost of ownership is a far more valuable view for the owner. TCO is defined as this. As you can see, this is a much broader view of the project. It is also linked to an organization's C-level. At that level, it acts to bring together traditional stovepipe budgeting strategies. While we will always budget for first cost, operations, maintenance, utilities, and renewals, we need to understand that these costs are cumulative and related. First cost is very much part of TCO, as are the traditional life cycle cost items of maintenance, operations, and utilities. I might add that things like LCC, LCA, and value engineering should all be considered part of the TCO process. Where TCO is different is the addition of renewal recapitalization costs, personnel issues, including the facility occupants, environmental considerations, and end-of-life decisions. TCO will provide estimates before construction, but then transition into actual costs over the facility's life. We can then learn from the differences between estimated and actual costs for future projects. When we encounter differences, we can decide if either our decisions are faulty, our needs changed, or other factors emerged. The feedback loop is essential to an organization and the industry. In the IT industry, Gartner provides a database for comparisons of costs between organizations. The AECOO does not yet have this capability, but I believe we would benefit significantly from a similar service. What is the impact for these comprehensive life cycle relationships? As I mentioned, planning and design and construction make up the first cost, but the amounts are relatively small compared to the entire project from an owner's point of view. While we in the design and construction community see this phase as significant, the owner often does not see them as essential or critical. They just are simply a cost of doing business. Operations and maintenance over the life of the facility, considerably more resources. Interestingly, design decisions can have a significant impact on the cost of an operation and maintenance. These costs are what we typically look at as the life cycle costs. However, it is not until we start occupying the facility do we get into more significant expenditures. This includes people's salaries and the equipment required to produce a product. It is at this point that the owner really starts paying attention. The sad fact is that many of the costs involved at this level were determined by the design decisions made much earlier in the process. These decisions are often not well connected with how the facility is to operate ultimately. Hence, significant additional cost can be assumed over the life of the facility. However, the ultimate value of an organization is in its value to society. Consider the value of a hospital, a school, or even housing. All the previous costs and some of this value can be included in TCO. Again, those decisions made at the design stage can significantly impact the facility's ability to contribute cost effectively and sustainably to society. Just one straightforward example of what we've addressed so far. These are two swimming pools that I frequent. The one on the left has lighting over the top of the pool to give consistent lumens across the water surface. The one on the right has reflected light off the ceiling, providing equal quality of light. What happens when a light bulb burns out? In the pool on the left, they have to close the pool and they end up replacing all the bulbs so that they don't have to close but once a year in the early fall because of swim season. They have to drain the pool or put scaffolding up in the pool to be able to get to the light bulbs. With the one on the right, they have a rolling scaffold and can replace just the lamp that is burned out without affecting the facility or users. This simple concept can be applied to facility decisions, from routine inspections and maintenance to more significant renewals and replacements. As you can imagine, these costs and impacts can have important cost implications. Let's take a little turn away from the practical examples to what is behind the curtain, driving TCO. We will look at what data is needed to drive decisions and how it is gathered, applied, and maintained. In current practice, just as with multiple independent budgets, we have a significant amount of wasteful data recollection for each aspect, phase, and sub-organization. Data is in fact the lowest level of the process. We acquire raw data, often multiple times. Rule number one in IT is that if you have two independent databases with similar data, likely both are wrong. Once we acquire data, we process it into usable information. Then we analyze it into corporate knowledge. When we communicate it, it becomes corporate intelligence. We apply that intelligence to decision making, which we formulate into action plans. However, it is not until we implement those action plans that we can attain actual value to the organization and to society. Now we're getting into the heart of this presentation. TCO needs data, but not a lot of new data, primarily existing data. That means you can likely start applying TCO today. Of course, the more data and the more accessible the data is, the better the results. Today, nearly all data exists electronically. We need to search out where it already exists as the first step, so we should never have to re-enter it. All organizations have an accounting system, and they also have some way to procure new items and manage their assets. They also have a personnel system. Through a combination of these, they pay taxes and hopefully identify a profit. If they have facilities, then they also have an integrated work management system, or IWMS, and manage work orders. These are the systems that are needed for TCO. When a company decides to build a new facility, they obtain an estimate. As mentioned, it often is an estimate of only first costs. Some of those cost decisions may be driven by existing data. It rarely includes any data that already exists as information, corporate knowledge, or corporate intelligence, as these entities are in separate business sectors in a corporation. Once a TCO strategy is adopted, the view becomes more holistic instead of being segmented. The mindset change that needs to occur is to identify ways to attain interoperability across the traditional independent data systems so that TCO and all costs associated with the facility can be identified. As the organization and TCO mature, then more data sets can be incorporated and linked to the assets to which they are related. Another system that sometimes exists in an organization is an enterprise resource planning system, or ERP. These have been traditionally hard to implement. An organization that has implemented it have likely overcome many of the interoperability challenges that exist. If you have an ERP, you're therefore likely further along in your positioning to implement TCO. This is where this discussion comes full circle to identify how an open BIM implementation can fit into the overall organization's data model for a fully functioning and informed TCO. TCO will then also determine the total value of a BIM for the organization. BIM needs TCO and TCO needs BIM. Sadly, many BIM and COBie files are delivered to an organization and sit on a shelf. The facility owner does not know what is included or how they can benefit from either. I will guarantee that if an organization has a TCO mindset, they will not only know what to do with the BIM and COBie, but also be able to supercharge their TCO implementation. This will be a perfect melding of information needed to obtain the optimum return on investment for all their data. The benefit to TCO is that owners now have all the data they need to make excellent long-term asset decisions to optimize their organization's profitability. All this will not occur if team mentality does not exist. This teamwork needs to include external members such as A&Es or operation and maintenance contractors. If each is doing their part in contributing information to the corporate knowledge, the workload will be spread and TCO implementation will be far more attainable. We're not talking about a traditional AECO team as an individual sport, but a team like a football, baseball, or volleyball team, where each member is responsible for their part of the game. And if they are not reaching their optimal levels, the team fails. It takes someone to receive a serve from the other team, pass the ball to the setter, then the setter sets the perfect ball to the hitter every time so that they can time their jump and get the kill. When it works, it's a beautiful thing. Along those same lines, it takes trust in the rest of your team in the data in order to make it happen. A significant factor leading to trust is knowing where the data came from and just how good the data is. It's okay to store poor quality data when you see that it is just a placeholder. It is not okay to think poor quality data is quality data. It is also critical that there be a chain of custody for the data, and you know that no one other than those identified could have changed the data. Therefore, security is paramount. You must take cybersecurity seriously throughout the organization. You need tools in place to build trust that can verify and the quality and security of the data at every turn. For all of this to work, we need to change the mindset of the practitioner, and we need to change the way we educate practitioners to see projects more holistically. We call this developing a T-shaped practitioner, someone who maintains a depth of understanding in their specific area of expertise and is fully aware of all the other phases of the project's life cycle, so they know where their data comes from and who will be using the information they produce. They cannot feel that they are the authoritative source for all the data. Let's spend the rest of our time together today looking at the benefits of the open flow of information in supporting TCO and BIM using open standards. First and foremost, we should now understand that TCO can be a metric that can monetize the benefits of BIM and other asset management tools. We are still in the early days of information interoperability, and the further to the right we move in this chart, the more significant the benefits. Few are reaching beyond delivery in PDF on this chart, and while some are delivered digitally today, rarely are the benefits qualified. It is essential to keep in mind that the owner sees the AECO process as a necessary negative, as once they have an idea, they want to start making money. No matter how fast we perform, it will be too long. One of my favorite examples of this and also a demonstration of how we can and must improve is the Broad Construction Hotel project in China, where they built 30 stories in 15 days. You've probably seen this. Bottom line is that they were able to deliver 330 hotel rooms in 15 days. Of course, for this to be true, one must assume that the factory is in full production mode, and this structure is not a one-off production. Normal facility delivery time is, say, 19 to 24 months, or say 570 days from contract to occupancy. Consider the potential gain in revenue if from 570 you subtract 15, or you're able to deliver in 555 days earlier. At $100 per room per night, that's $55,000 per room. For the 330 rooms, that's over $18.3 million that the owner now can capture because he's able to rent out those rooms. Also consider the cost of money for 15 days versus 19 to 24 months. Clearly, there's a lot of room for improvement in our industry, even though this won't necessarily be the norm. Let's look at a few more realistic case studies. These are partial implementations of APA TCO as we are just beginning this movement, and I know of no one with any full scope results quite yet. Some folks have started the process, but nothing to report just yet. So we'll look at a couple of partial examples that will point us in the right direction. This first example is a simple life cycle example. However, adding in a location makes this a little more critical, such as with our earlier example with a swimming pool. Given that LEDs do not require frequent relamping, the labor costs are significantly reduced, and the issue of difficulty in replacing is somewhat muted. Therefore, reduced energy usage becomes a critical element in this example. The TCO strategy will work in the smallest or largest organization. It is very scalable. You can start today with your resources, as it is more of a frame of mind. In this example, I'm using our homeowners association. I've been responsible for a swimming pool for over 35 years. Our story begins when I first moved into the neighborhood in 1986. The attitude of the board at that time was not to raise the annual assessment. However, in the year 2000, we had a $100,000 scheduled pool renewal that came due, and no funds were set aside. We were forced to do a special assessment and take out a loan. Shortly after that, we commissioned our first reserve study, which we have updated every 5 years since, in projecting expenses 25 years into the future. While the state now requires reserve studies, I'm guessing few of them are as extensively used as our board does use ours, because we use it for setting annual budgets, and that's primarily because we understand, what happens when you don't plan. We can now tell homeowners why their dues go up and demonstrate a solid financial foundation for our community. We were able to add a handicap ramp and make other improvements when we renewed the facility in 2016, with only positive reaction from the community. The closest example we have to an APA TCO implementation was when Doug Christensen, the father of APA TCO standard, worked at a large multi-campus university. Unfortunately, Doug passed away before the standard could be completed, but I think he would be proud of what Anna Thiemer and I produced based on his guidance. The board of this university system requires a TCO study for every new asset to be added to their portfolio. They want to ensure that the new facility is not overtaxing their resources and ability to sustain the entire portfolio. If resources are not available, they can eliminate a facility from their portfolio or add additional support staff. They track the impact of previous budget decisions and use the process to resource level future projects. There's no question the TCO process is sound, and I look forward to examples where folks have implemented TCO for their entire portfolios with great success very soon. I titled this presentation Aspirational Vision. I believe that the transition to TCO will profoundly impact asset management and decision-making in the future. It will hopefully be an aspiration to everyone listening to this presentation. The question is, will you be the catalyst for change and encourage your organization to adopt a TCO strategy? I certainly hope you do. Thank you for your attention. I will now take a couple of questions. If you have any questions that we can get to today, please get in touch with me. There's also a white paper available on this subject on my website. Thank you.